world. Always glad to see all of you. Thank you all for the prayers for Richard, who has had some health challenges recently. He's doing better. Hopefully, he's at home watching. And if you are, I'll be home much later today. So hang in there. All right. So it's been a couple of weeks, and when I left, we were talking about Yamas and Niyamas from yoga philosophy and kind of comparing those with the Ten Commandments in the Bible. And since it's been a little bit, I'm going to do a little quick review, of course. I'm sure you've all got them down. We did the 5 Yamas. We did 1 Niyama. The 5 Yamas, of course, being non-violence, which is foundational. Truthfulness, non-stealing, non-excess, non-grasping. Those are the 5 Yamas. And then we started the Niyama of purity. Piece of cake. Y'all have had 2 weeks to practice. You've got it all down, right? Perfect, right? But remember, these are lifelong practices. And what do we say about practice? Practice leads to progress, leads to peace. So I want you to repeat after me. Practice. Okay, let's start that. Let's do that again. Practice. Leads to progress. Leads to peace. All right, you got it. Now let's keep going. Next niyama is Santosha. Santosha, or contentment. Now, in unity, of course, we teach that we are all one, right? So all of these yamas and all these niyamas and all these commandments, I need to tell you real quick before we jump into contentment, whether we're talking about yamas, which are our relationship with others, or niyamas, our relationship with ourselves, since we're all one, they all work with one another. Just like the commandments. Remember the commandments, 4 of them are about our relationship with God, 6 of them about our relationship with one another. So regardless, it's all part of the whole. So let's get into Santosha, contentment. Now there's not a direct one-on-one link to a 10 commandment, but there is one that comes a little close. It's the Sabbath commandment. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days we labor and do our work, but the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord. So how does contentment relate to keeping Sabbath? Well, Sabbath for some is like Sunday, like what we do here. Get together in spiritual community. Other people meet other days. That's one way of observing Sabbath. That's a great way of doing that. Another way of observing Sabbath, for me, however, is just taking time to rest from our over-scheduled lives. And you can do that anytime. And that's another good way of observing Sabbath. It's a way of saying that we are content with what we have accomplished to that point, right? It's a way of practicing contentment. We're content with what we've accomplished. It's a way of saying we know that the world is going to turn on its axis just fine if we take a break. The world's going to turn on its axis just fine, and that to-do list that we are always so stressed about, as long as we are on the planet, that list will be there. So we can set it aside for a while. We can also connect Santosha with the commandments about not stealing, not coveting, and not committing adultery. In other words, by observing these commandments, we're saying that we are content with what we have and who we have in our lives. We're content with our relationships. We're content to say that we are enough. We are content with ourselves. Or paraphrasing the words of the Apostle Paul, I have learned to be happy with little as with much, and I've learned to be happy with much as I am with little. Now, here's an interesting thing about Santosha. It also means trying to be content with what is in the moment without labeling it. Our series author, Deborah Adele, says that the yogis teach us that all things are neutral. And it's that our personal labeling of those things which make them either desirable or repulsive to us. Now, here's a quick example of that. When I was about 6 years old, I remember during one particular meal, I was being a little bit stubborn. Y'all are shocked, aren't you? Oh, Daddy's being stubborn, yeah. And in this case, I didn't want to eat my green peas. Did not want to eat my green peas. My dad was very frustrated with my stubbornness, so he took my plate, took all the food off my plate, filled it with green peas, and said, eat the green peas. I had to eat all the green peas. I ate all the green peas. I asked to go outside to play. I was given permission. I went outside, and I promptly recycled those green peas. And since that day, I have hated green peas. I have really hated them. And to be fair, I've made some progress. I can tolerate green peas in a soup or in a stew. Not pea soup. Can't do pea soup. But in like a beef stew or a vegetable stew, I can do that. But things like pea salad or just cooked green peas on my plate, nope, that is not happening. As a matter of fact, if I smell those little green English peas cooking, my stomach just does one of these. Now, isn't that silly? I mean, does that make any sense? I mean, on one level, maybe it does make sense, right? Maybe on one level. But on another level, if you think about it, green peas never did anything to me. I had one really nasty experience with green peas, and I labeled them based on that experience. And that story is another example of another teaching about contentment. And that teaching is we are responsible for our own disturbances. We are responsible for our own disturbance. Isn't that annoying? Oh my gosh. But think about this. How many times do we allow the behavior and the words of others to emotionally send us over the edge? I do this when I watch TV. I will turn on the news and I will see certain people giving a speech or talking or doing, my blood pressure just does this. Have you ever done that? It doesn't have to be the news. It could be anything. And the weirdest thing is we don't know these people. And chances are we are never going to meet these people. Yet look how much power we give them to disturb our peace and our space. Now, is that normal? Again, on one level, yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong, I still believe that we are all beautiful expressions of God. We are. And I think if we were honest here, we would say to ourselves sometimes, but some of the expressions of our fellow human beings just work our last available nerve. People are just so annoying. And I can't speak for you. I can only speak for myself. I know I'm annoying sometimes too. So it's not just other people. It's me as well, which annoys me even more. So what if we tried to remember here that the negativity of others or their negative energy really isn't about us? That it's more about them than it is about us. And at the same time, when we are in that negative space and we're all worked up, maybe it's not about other people. Maybe we're recognizing something in them that is also in us. Yeah, that's kind of tough pill to swallow, isn't it? Now, to be clear, with contentment, and when we're talking about accepting what is in the moment, we're not saying that all behavior is okay and that all words are okay. We're not saying to put up with, abuse or anything like that. Contentment in these cases means just doing our best to just accept what is in the moment. This is happening, whatever this is. This is happening. Whether we like it or not, it's happening. But then doing our best not to lose control of our response to what is happening. Because, folks, that's where our power lies. Our power lies in our response. There's an event, there's a response or a reaction, and that pause in the middle, that is where our power is. I also like this summary of Santosha from Deborah Adele, who says, true freedom and contentment begin to find their way to us when we can see things as they are and not spend so much time trying to manipulate them according to our preferences. Or there's a story about a 116-year-old man who, when asked, what is your secret to living such a long life? When he was asked that question, he replied, when it rains, I let it. When it rains, I let it. So the lesson here with contentment just might be, sometimes you just got to let it rain. All right, that's contentment. Next up, tapas, or self-discipline. This stuff just gets better and better, doesn't it? Contentment, purity, and all this stuff, and now self-discipline. Tapas has a lot of different meanings. It means heat. It can also mean catharsis, austerity, self-discipline, spiritual effort, change, tolerance, or transformation. You know, all of our favorite things. All of our favorite things. Deborah Adele says that tapas is the day-to-day choice to burn non-supportive habits of the body and mind and choosing to forsake momentary pleasure for future reward. In other words, we are foregoing immediate gratification. And that's hard sometimes, right? That makes us a little uncomfortable. But if you think that is uncomfortable, listen to this. There are yogis who, in the dead of winter, sit for 3 hours dressed only in a loincloth. It gets better. They have a container so that it drips water, cold water, on their heads and all down their bodies for the entire 3 hours. And they do that every day for 45 days. Talk about putting off immediate gratification. But at least they get summer off, right? No, they do not. There's a summer version. In summer, these yogis sit for 3 hours surrounded by 5 fires. And they have a small container with a fire in it, small fire, and it's on their head. I am not making this up. And it is for 3 hours a day for 45 days in a row. Why do they do this? That is their tapas. That is their spiritual practice. They say this is a centering practice. And some of us have trouble meditating for 10 minutes. Now, of course, we are not monks. We are not ascetics like these folks. We are what you would call householders. Still, it's important for us to take our self-discipline practices seriously. It means being as consistent as possible, even when it is inconvenient. Tapas for us can take all kinds of forms: volunteering, consistently, yoga, chair, or however you do yoga, consistently, meditation, consistently, study, consistently, community, consistently. For folks in recovery, Tapas could be consistently working your program. Even if you've been sober for 40 or 50 years, still working the program consistently. Tapas can be any positive practice where we willingly offer ourselves in service to the next higher version of our evolution. And the key is consistency. Tapas relates to the Ten Commandments overall, as it requires consistent practice following the commandments. There's not a direct one-on-one. But there's another form of tapas as well. Deborah Adele refers to these as cathartic times of our lives. Remember, tapas can also mean catharsis. Catharsis usually isn't any fun either. These are the really times of deep desperation, times when you might feel hopeless, that life is just not making sense. And no matter how much we tell ourselves and how much we truly believe that God is always with us and within us and all around us, no matter how often we say that, there are times in our lives when it might feel like God has abandoned us. And that's all right to feel that way. It's okay to say that. You think, well, no, in unity we don't say stuff like that. It's okay to say stuff like that. If you think you're alone in feeling that way, read the Bible. Read Lamentations. Read some of the Psalms. Read the book of Job. People got really pissed off at God. And they weren't afraid to say it. And God did not strike them dead. So it's okay. It's important to feel what you feel, and to say what you feel needs to be said. Don't beat yourselves up if you get in one of those cathartic places in your lives and you're feeling kind of beat up. It happens. It's important to feel what you do. Trying to avoid your pain or trying to avoid our anger or our confusion during these times by saying something like, oh, well, it's all in divine order, it's not helpful. It is. Look, I believe in divine order. Please don't get me wrong. At the same time, divine order doesn't feel so divine, now does it? And if somebody comes to us and they are in pain and they're sharing their pain with us, please don't tell them, oh, it's all in divine order. You may mean it. You may mean it with all your heart and mean very well. It can feel so dismissive, even if we don't intend it. Please don't do that. Don't do that to other people, and don't do it to yourself. And don't let other people do that to you either. As challenging as some of our cathartic times can be, Adele also believes they can also shape us and mold us as debris in our life is burned away. Now that sounds all nice and holy, but it doesn't make it any easier, does it? What I can say, I can't speak for you, what I can say for me is I've had some cathartic times in my life, and with the gift of hindsight, big qualifier, with the gift of hindsight, I can look back and say, oh, now I get it. I see how that shaped me. I see how that works now. And if I'm being honest, I'll tell you, I did not appreciate it in the moment. Not at all. Charlene Westerman states that during cathartic times we have two choices. We can break down or we can break open. We can break down or we can break open. She says, and I tend to agree, we cannot prevent these times from happening, nor can we know their shape or their outcome. What we can do is prepare for them. And we do that through practicing tapas, by being consistent in our spiritual practices, developing the strength we need to deal with the unpleasant times in our lives, and to do so in the healthiest way we can manage. Tapas gives us staying power. That's the lesson of tapas. As I've mentioned several times during the course of this series, there's a lot going on in the world today. And I know I've got a lot going on right now, and I know some of you have a lot going on right now. And you know what, folks? Sometimes it feels like one cathartic moment right after another. And sometimes all those beautiful spiritual teachings and practices and affirmations don't make it any easier. What they do, however, is they are tools. And they give us the tools we need to face our cathartic moments and our challenges. Some of you probably remember the story of Jacob in the Bible, right? Wrestled with an angel, with God, with something. If you remember that story, the way we might interpret it in unity is sometimes, like Jacob, we wrestle with situations which at first seem overpowering. In the story of Jacob, his hip was dislocated in his struggle. Like Jacob, sometimes we might feel like we're getting a little beat up in our struggles as well. Yet, like Jacob, if we hold on just long enough, if you can trust the process long enough, eventually there's a blessing. Somewhere, someday, somehow. And chances are that blessing is not going to look like anything we expected. The good news is that blessing could look a whole lot better than anything we could ever imagine. So in closing, as Jennifer comes forward to lead us in a moment of meditation, the next time you experience a cathartic time in your life, or if you are experiencing one now, I encourage us, all of us, to ask ourselves a couple of questions. Do I choose to break down, or do I choose to break open? Do I choose to trust the process long enough to hold on for the blessing? Because the choice is truly ours. And may we all choose wisely. It is so, and so it is. Amen.
Amen. Now, oftentimes, we have sung this song during the holidays because we're talking about the light. But I think it's great to sing it throughout the year, too, and remind ourselves who we are. Remind our neighbors who they are. I am